Hello, my name is Isabella, and I have chosen Language and Nuance by David Brinkman Soul for my Brzezinski case study. To summarize this case, James and Rita, as they are called in this book, are undocumented immigrants from Mexico. Free therapy is available to low-income patients at this clinic with translators available to them. The parents only speak Spanish, however, their children are bilingual and receive a U.S. education. It isn't made known if they are U.S. citizens. As for the benefit of a consistent interpreter in this case, discussions were made with the therapist on whether the daughter should translate, but since they wanted family therapy sessions and for the sake of accuracy, they opted for an interpreter, and eventually the family began to trust the interpreter because they consistently showed up for their sessions and allowed for an easier conversation. And there are some biases and assumptions made by the therapist that will be addressed. Main issues. 1, immigration status. The family is under constant stress due to the parents' undocumented status. It impacts their daily decisions. There is a real fear. 2, access to care. There are only a handful of clinics in this area that offer interpreters. Lack of affordable health care for undocumented people. 3, language barriers. The need for a translator comes with a risk of not being fully understood. 4, cultural differences. Everyone has a different culture from the other in this study. And 5, therapist bias. The therapist initially thought that since the interpreter and the family spoke the same language, there wouldn't be differences in culture and ethnicity. He later found that to be wrong. He also made assumptions based on his own background, I believe to get to a point of relatability, but failed to see their unique experiences and background that eventually changed. He also refers to the parents as illegal immigrants, which has a negative connotation and suggests biases and prejudices. Who is impacted? Everyone is. James and Rita, since they are undocumented, face chronic stress because of their status and also have limited options to care. They also struggle with language barriers with their own therapy and at the world at large. And there is a cultural disconnect between them and their children and their therapist, as well as their interpreter. Their children are bicultural and bilingual, but there is a disconnect at home with their parents because they're also teenagers figuring out their own way. As for the therapist, they are unfamiliar with other cultures and have to confront their own bias. Care was limited by language barrier at first, but once people became comfortable with one another, care was able to be provided. And for the translator, they have the same language but come from a different background culturally and ethnically, but they became part of the family support system, and they eventually were seen as an extended family member, and they carry a great deal of responsibility in facilitating an accurate conversation on sensitive topics. Positionalities. James and Rita are both undocumented immigrants, so they have limited options for care. They only speak Spanish, so they do have to rely on translators, and they are working class people, so they have less options to seek out other care. They are also members of a tight-knit community. The children are bilingual and bicultural. They have a U.S. education, and because they are brought up in two cultures, they have cultural differences with their parents and their peers because they are part of two worlds. It's difficult to navigate. And the therapist is an educated U.S.-born therapist. They are in a position of power because he is the provider of care. He only speaks English, and acknowledges his privilege in being a U.S. citizen and not having to worry about his status. The interpreter is bilingual, but they come from a different background from their family. They provide care to the family by giving their services and eventually become part of their extended family. Intersecting identities. James and Rita are both undocumented, speak only Spanish, are from Mexico, are low income, and are working class. Their children are raised in the U.S., are bilingual and bicultural, and children of undocumented immigrants. The therapist is their therapy provider, only speaks English, is a U.S. citizen, and we can assume may be middle class. The interpreter is also, like the children, bilingual and bicultural, a community member and service provider. Methods to alleviate the issues. We could have more bilingual therapists, and if we're unable to provide bilingual therapists, translators or interpreters. I suggest cultural education for healthcare providers, and within that education, address biases, assumptions that may arise, and prejudices. I also recommend more funding for these services so people are able to take advantage of them, because healthier people is better for everyone around. I also propose more progressive immigration law reform. I think a lot of the chronic stress they face would be alleviated if we had better immigration laws, and allowing for people to come here and work legally. Closing thoughts. This was touched upon by our professor in one of our last classes, but how will language interpretation services be impacted by our current president's push for English as the official language? Where will it leave the people that our healthcare system is supposed to serve? Who will be left behind? Who will be left without care? Thank you for your time.